The ground beneath Olivia Jensen's feet gave way with a sound like thunder splitting the earth in two. And in the half-second before she plunged into darkness, she saw the horrified face of her father disappearing above her as tons of rock and timber crashed down between them. Paradise, Nevada had been her home for 3 months now, ever since Papa had dragged her west from St. Louis in the spring of 1883, chasing rumors of silver veins that supposedly ran deep beneath these unforgiving hills. Mama had died the winter before, and Papa threw himself into this mad venture as if he could outrun his grief by moving far enough away from where it had happened. Olivia had followed because she had nowhere else to go, and at 22 years old, unmarried and without prospects, a woman alone had few choices in this world. The mine shaft Papa had been excavating was supposed to be safe. He had hired an engineer from Carson City who swore the supports would hold, that the tunnel was properly braced. But the engineer had left 2 weeks ago, and Papa had kept digging, driven by something close to madness, convinced that fortune lay just another few feet deeper into the mountain. Now, Olivia lay in absolute darkness, her right leg pinned beneath a timber that had crushed down across her shin. The pain was extraordinary, a white-hot agony that made her vision swim with stars even though there was no light to see by. She could taste copper and dust in her mouth, feel the weight of the mountain pressing down from above. Somewhere beyond the wall of debris, she could hear Papa screaming her name, his voice raw and desperate. "I am alive," she tried to shout, but her voice came out as barely a whisper, choked with dust and fear. She tried again, forcing air through her constricted throat. "Papa, I am alive." The screaming stopped. For a terrible moment there was only silence, and Olivia thought perhaps she had imagined his voice entirely, that she was alone and dying and no one would ever know where to find her body. Then she heard it, muffled but unmistakable. "Hold on, Livy, hold on." She did not know how long she lay there in the dark. Time became meaningless when you could not see the sun, when every breath brought fresh dust into your lungs, and every heartbeat sent new waves of pain radiating from your trapped leg. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes jolting awake convinced that the ceiling was collapsing further, sometimes slipping into fevered dreams where Mama stood at the foot of her bed in their old St. Louis house, telling her to wake up, that breakfast was getting cold. The first sound of digging from above brought her fully alert. It was not Papa's voice she heard now, but multiple voices, men shouting to each other, the scrape of shovels against stone. She tried to call out again, but her throat was too dry, too clogged with dust. Instead she listened, tracking the sounds, trying to judge how far away they were. 10 feet, 20, it was impossible to tell. "There is someone working the supports," a voice called, younger than Papa's, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or Oklahoma. "The whole section is unstable. If we dig wrong, we will bring the rest of the mountain down." "Then we dig right," another voice answered, older and gruff. "Jensen says his daughter is down there. We do not leave a woman to die in the dark." Olivia felt tears streak through the dust on her face. These were strangers, men who owed her nothing, and yet they were up there risking their lives to reach her. Paradise was barely a town, just a collection of tents and hastily built wooden structures scattered across the desert valley, populated by prospectors and gamblers and men running from something back east. She had not expected kindness here. The digging continued. Hours passed, or maybe days. Olivia could no longer tell. Her trapped leg had gone numb, which frightened her more than the pain had. She knew what that meant, had seen gangrene take a neighbor's arm back in St. Louis after a factory accident. If they did not reach her soon, if they could not free her leg, she would lose it. Or she would die, The options seemed equally terrible. "Miss Jensen," the young voice again, closer now. "Miss Jensen, if you can hear me, make a sound. Anything." She scraped her fingernails against the rock beside her, a feeble scratching that surely could not carry through all that stone. But the digging intensified, focused now on the area directly above her head. "I hear her," the young voice said, and there was something fierce and determined in it that made Olivia's heart clench. "She is right here. Keep digging." More time passed. Olivia felt herself slipping away again, her thoughts becoming scattered and strange. She thought about the dance she had attended the week before she left St. Louis, how Thomas Whitmore had asked her to marry him, and she had said no because she did not love him, because she wanted something more than a respectable marriage to a respectable man who made her feel nothing at all. She wondered if Thomas had found someone else by now, some sensible girl who would give him sensible children and keep his house in sensible order. She wondered if dying in a collapsed mine shaft in Nevada was the universe's way of punishing her for wanting more than she deserved. Then there was light. It was just a pinprick at first, a tiny beam of brightness that seemed impossibly brilliant after so long in the dark. Olivia fixed her eyes on it, afraid to blink in case it disappeared. The light widened, became a gap, and then a hand reached through, groping in the darkness. "I've got something," the young voice said. "Her hand, I think. Miss Jensen, can you grab hold?" Olivia reached up with trembling fingers and felt warm, callous skin close around hers. The touch was electric, a connection to the living world above, and she held on with what little strength she had left. "I have got you," the voice said, and there was a quality to it now that Olivia could not quite name, something raw and emotional. "I swear to God I have got you. We will get you out." The gap widened further. More hands joined the first, pulling away rocks and splintered timber. Olivia could see shapes now, silhouettes backlit by the afternoon sun. 3 men, maybe 4, working with desperate speed. And one face that came close to the opening, peering down at her with eyes that caught the light like amber. "Hello there," he said, and even through her delirium, Olivia registered that he was young, probably close to her own age, with a strong jaw darkened by several days of stubble and brown hair that fell across his forehead. "My name is Matthew Reeves. We are going to get you out of there, Miss Jensen, I promise you that." "My leg," Olivia managed to whisper. "It is trapped." Matthew's expression tightened, but he nodded. "We will handle it, just hold on a little longer." He disappeared from view, and she heard urgent conversation above, too low for her to make out the words. Then Matthew was back, along with another man who carried a pry bar and a length of rope. "This is going to hurt," Matthew said, his voice gentle despite the warning. "We need to lift the timber off your leg. I wish there was another way, but there is not. Can you be brave for me?" Olivia almost laughed, a hysterical sound that died in her throat. Brave, as if she had any choice. "Do it," she said. Matthew climbed down into the gap, squeezing through the narrow opening with an agility that spoke of a life spent outdoors, working with his body. He was taller than she had realized, lean and strong in the way of men who earned their living through hard physical labor. He positioned himself beside her, and even through the pain and fear, Olivia was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of him in the cold darkness. "On 3, the other man said from above. 1, 2, 3, the timber shifted, and Olivia's world exploded into white-hot agony. She screamed, could not help it, and felt Matthew's arms come around her, holding her together as if she might fly apart from the pain. I know," he murmured against her hair, his voice breaking. "I am sorry. God, I am so sorry." The timber lifted away entirely, and hands reached down to pull Olivia up through the gap. She caught a glimpse of her leg as they maneuvered her through the opening and felt bile rise in her throat. The shin was clearly broken, bent at an angle that made her vision gray at the edges. But there was no blood, or at least not much, and that was something. Then she was out, lying on the ground in the blessed sunlight with the sky impossibly blue above her and Papa sobbing as he clutched her hand. Matthew emerged from the gap behind her, his clothes covered in dust, and Olivia saw that his hands were bleeding, the palms torn and raw from hours of digging through rock without gloves. "Your hands," she said stupidly, because it seemed important somehow that she acknowledge what he had done, what he had sacrificed for her. Matthew glanced down at his hands as if noticing the damage for the first time. He shrugged, a quick, jerky movement. "They will heal. You are alive. That is all that matters." A doctor was sent for, or rather the closest thing Paradise had to a doctor, which was a former Army surgeon named Patterson, who had been dishonorably discharged for reasons no one spoke about openly, but everyone seemed to know. He set Olivia's leg in the single room Papa rented above the general store, and to his credit, his hands were steady despite the whiskey on his breath, his manner professional despite his checkered past. "You will walk again," Patterson said when he had finished splinting the leg. "It was a clean break and you are young, but you need to stay off it for at least 6 weeks, longer if you can manage. No weight bearing at all. 6 weeks. Olivia lay back against the thin pillow and closed her eyes. 6 weeks trapped in this room, dependent on Papa who could barely take care of himself these days, in a town where she knew no one and had no friends. The prospect seemed almost as suffocating as the collapsed mine. But over the following days, she discovered she was not as alone as she had feared. Matthew Reeves came to visit every morning, arriving just after dawn with fresh water from the pump, and whatever he could scrounge from the camp cook for breakfast. He was a ranch hand, he told her, working for a man named Cowboy who ran cattle on a spread about 10 miles north of Paradise. He had been in town buying supplies when the mine collapsed, had heard Papa screaming for help and come running. "I grew up in East Texas," Matthew said on the 3rd day, sitting in the rickety chair beside Olivia's bed while she ate the biscuits and bacon he had brought. "My father had a small farm, mostly cotton. He died when I was 16 and Mama followed 6 months later. I think her heart just gave out from grief. After that, I drifted west, worked whatever jobs I could find. Been with Cowboy for about 2 years now." "Do you like it?" Olivia asked. "The ranch work." Matthew considered this, his amber eyes distant. "I like the cattle. I like being outside, working with my hands. Cowboy is fair, pays on time, does not ask too many questions about a man's past. But I do not know if I want to be a hired hand forever. Sometimes I think about saving enough to buy my own place, a small spread where I could run a few head, maybe grow some hay. Build something that is mine, you know." Olivia did know. It was the same restless wanting that had made her turn down Thomas Whitmore's proposal, the sense that there had to be more to life than the safe, predictable path laid out before her. "What is stopping you?" she asked. Matthew looked down at his hands, which were still healing, the torn skin pink and new. "Money mostly. Land is not cheap, and cattle are expensive. I have been saving, but it will be a few more years before I have enough." He paused, then added quietly, "And I guess I never had a good enough reason to put down roots anywhere. Did not seem like there was anything worth staying for." There was something in the way he said it, the way his eyes met hers, that made Olivia's breath catch. She looked away, suddenly flustered, and focused on the biscuit in her hands. "Well, I hope you find your reason someday," she said, trying to keep her voice light. The visits continued. Every morning, Matthew brought food and water. Every evening, he returned after his work was done. smelling of horses and sun-warmed earth, and sat with Olivia while the desert cooled outside and the shadows lengthened across the floor. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about the cattle drives he had worked, the time a rattlesnake spooked his horse and sent him flying into a patch of prickly pear cactus, the way the stars looked from the open range on a moonless night when you were 100 miles from the nearest town. She told him about St. Louis, about Mama's love of music and Papa's slow descent into obsession after she died, about the books she had read and the places she dreamed of seeing someday when she was not trapped in a rented room with a broken leg. Papa was grateful for Matthew's help, but he was also distracted, his mind already turning back to the mine. 3 days after the collapse, he began talking about reopening it, about clearing the debris and shoring up the supports. Olivia tried to talk him out of it, but he would not listen. The silver was down there, he insisted. He had been so close, he could not give up now. "You almost killed me," Olivia said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "That mine is not safe, Papa. It will never be safe. Please, can we not just go back to St. Louis? We could start over there, find a different way." But Papa shook his head, his eyes fever bright. "There is nothing for us in St. Louis, Livy. Your mother is dead. Our old life is dead. This is all we have left." Matthew was there when Papa said this, standing in the corner with his hat in his hands. After Papa left, muttering about needing to find more timber, Matthew came and sat on the edge of Olivia's bed, careful not to jostle her injured leg. "He is going to get himself killed," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "I can see it in him, Matthew. He does not care if he lives or dies anymore. He just wants to dig until he finds silver or the mountain buries him, and I cannot stop him. I can barely walk." Matthew reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "You are not responsible for your father's choices," he said gently. "I know you love him, but you cannot save him from himself." "He is all I have left," Olivia whispered. "No," Matthew said, and his voice was fierce now, intense. "He is not." Olivia looked up at him, her breath catching at the expression on his face. It was naked and vulnerable, full of things they had not yet said aloud. "Matthew, I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know we have only known each other for a week. But Olivia, from the moment I pulled you out of that mine, from the second I held your hand in the darkness, I have not been able to think about anything else. You are brave and smart and beautiful, and when I am with you, I feel like I have finally found what I have been looking for all these years. The reason to put down roots, the reason to stay." Olivia's heart was hammering in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such raw honesty. Thomas Whitmore's proposal had been polite and proper, couched in talk of mutual respect and practical considerations. This was something else entirely, something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not understand it, but I do. When you are here, I feel safe. When you leave, I count the hours until you come back. And I know it is foolish because we barely know each other, but Matthew, I think I am falling in love with you." The smile that broke across Matthew's face was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of joy. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, his lips soft against hers, and Olivia felt something inside her chest crack open. Some locked door she had not even known was there. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I am definitely falling in love with you," Matthew said, his forehead resting against hers. "Actually, I think I am already there." Over the next few weeks, as Olivia's legs slowly healed, their relationship deepened. Matthew spent every moment he could spare with her, and on days when his work kept him away, Olivia found herself restless and anxious, watching the door and straining to hear the sound of his boots on the stairs. When he was there, they talked and laughed and stole kisses when Papa was not looking. Matthew brought her wildflowers he picked on the range, clumsy bouquets of desert marigolds and brittlebush that wilted quickly in the heat, but meant everything because he had thought of her. Olivia taught him to play chess using a set she had brought from St. Louis, and they spent long evenings bent over the board, their heads close together, while Matthew learned strategy and Olivia learned the particular way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was concentrating. Papa continued his work on the mine, hiring day laborers when he could afford them and working alone when he could not. He came back each evening exhausted and filthy, his hands bleeding from the same kind of injuries Matthew had sustained saving Olivia. But unlike Matthew, Papa did not seem to notice or care about the pain. He was disappearing into his obsession, becoming a ghost of the man he had been before Mama died. "Come with me," Matthew said one evening when Olivia had been out of bed for a week, practicing walking with the crutch Patterson had given her. "Leave Paradise. Come north to the Calloway Ranch. I talked to the boss, and he said his wife could use help with the house and the cooking. It would be honest work, and you would be away from here, away from the mine and the constant worry about your father." Olivia wanted to say yes immediately. The idea of leaving this dusty, desolate place, of starting fresh somewhere with Matthew, was almost unbearably appealing. But she looked toward the window, toward the distant hills where Papa was probably still digging by lamplight, and felt the weight of obligation settle over her shoulders. "I cannot leave him," she said, her voice thick with regret. "He is my father, Matthew. I am all he has left. If I abandon him now, what kind of daughter would that make me?" "A daughter who deserves her own life," Matthew said, but his voice was gentle, not accusatory. He sighed and pulled her into his arms, careful of her still healing leg. "I understand. I do not like it, but I understand. Just promise me you will think about it. Promise me you will not sacrifice yourself on the altar of his grief." Olivia promised, though she was not sure she could keep that promise. Duty and love were tangled up in her chest in a knot she did not know how to unravel. The decision was made for her 3 weeks later when Papa's mine collapsed for the second time. He was working alone, digging in the pre-dawn darkness because he could not sleep, because the obsession had him fully in its grip now. The supports gave way with no warning, and this time there was no one there to hear him scream for help. They found his body 2 days later when Matthew and a group of men from town finally excavated the tunnel. Papa had been crushed instantly, they told Olivia, as if that would make it easier somehow. As if knowing he had not suffered would erase the fact that he was gone, that she was truly alone now. Olivia did not cry at first. She felt numb, hollowed out, as if someone had reached inside and removed some essential part of her. She sat in the rented room above the general store and stared at Papa's belongings, his boots still caked with dried mud, his coat hanging on the hook by the door, and could not quite comprehend that he would never wear them again. Matthew stayed with her through it all. He arranged for the burial, paid for it out of his own wages when it became clear Papa had spent every cent on the mine. He sat with Olivia during the service, held her hand while the preacher said words that meant nothing, and caught her when her legs finally gave out and the tears came. Huge, racking sobs that seemed to tear something loose inside her chest. "I should have stopped him," she gasped against Matthew's shirt. "I should have done something." "There was nothing you could have done," Matthew said, his voice fierce. "You hear me, Olivia? Nothing. He made his choice and it was not your fault." In the weeks that followed, Olivia had to decide what to do with her life. The mine was worthless. nothing but a death trap that would cost more to properly excavate than any silver it might contain. The room above the general store had been paid through the end of the month, but after that, she would have nowhere to go. She had a little money, what Papa had left in his pockets, plus the few dollars she had saved from her old life in St. Louis, but it would not last long. Matthew asked her again to come with him to the Cowboy ranch, and this time, Olivia said yes. There was nothing keeping her in paradise anymore, no obligations or duties to tie her to this place of dust and death. She packed her few belongings, sold Papa's things to pay his remaining debts, and climbed onto the wagon beside Matthew on a clear morning in late August. The Cowboy ranch was everything paradise was not. It sat in a valley where a spring-fed creek provided reliable water, surrounded by grasslands that turned golden in the late summer sun. The house was large and well-built, made of logs hauled down from the mountains, and Mrs. Calloway turned out to be a brisk, kind woman in her 40s who took one look at Olivia and seemed to understand everything without needing to be told. "You will stay in the room off the kitchen," Mrs. Calloway said, showing Olivia through the house. "It is small but private, and it gets good light in the mornings. I will teach you what needs doing, but do not worry if it takes you time to learn. We all need time to heal after we have lost someone." Olivia threw herself into the work with a desperation that probably worried Matthew, but she could not help it. When she was busy, when her hands were occupied with cooking or cleaning or mending, she did not have to think about Papa or the mine or the way his life had ended. She learned to bake bread in the big cast-iron oven, to churn butter and smoke meat and tend the vegetable garden Mrs. Calloway kept behind the house. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and hard work and simple satisfactions of seeing a job done well. And every evening, Matthew would find her. They would walk along the creek as the sun set, talking about their days, and slowly, gently, Olivia felt the numbness begin to recede. The grief did not go away, but it became something she could carry, a weight that no longer threatened to drag her under. On a cool evening in October, with the first frost sparkling on the grass, Matthew took Olivia to a spot he had found up in the hills where you could see the whole valley spread out below like a painting. The ranch house was a warm glow of lamplight in the distance, and the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I bought land," Matthew said without preamble. 200 acres about 5 miles west of here. There is a creek running through it and good grazing. Calloway helped me with the loan, said he would co-sign the note because I have been a good worker. It is not much yet, just empty land, but I am going to build something there. A house, a barn, corrals for horses. It is going to take time, but I can see it in my mind, Olivia. I can see exactly how it is going to be. Olivia's heart was beating fast. She thought she knew where this was going, but she did not want to assume, did not want to be wrong. "That sounds wonderful, Matthew. I want you to see it too," he said, turning to face her fully. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for hers. "I want you to help me build it, not as my housekeeper or my cook, but as my wife. I know the timing might seem wrong with your father passing so recently. I know people will say we are rushing. But Olivia, I also know that life is short and uncertain, and when you find something real, something worth fighting for, you have to hold on to it with both hands." He pulled something from his pocket, and in the fading light, Olivia saw it was a ring. Not fancy, just a simple silver band, but beautiful in its simplicity. "I had this made in town last week," Matthew said. "The silver came from a mine up near Virginia City, so it is Nevada silver, from this land we have both come to. I do not have much to offer you yet except hard work and a future we will have to build from nothing. But I swear to you, Olivia Jensen, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. I will love you and protect you and dig through mountains with my bare hands if that is what it takes to keep you safe. So what do you say? Will you marry me?" Olivia was crying, but this time they were good tears, happy tears, the kind that came from joy rather than grief. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Matthew, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Then he was kissing her, deep and passionate, and Olivia kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her love and hope and gratitude into that single moment. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Paradise, with the Calloways standing as witnesses and half the town turning out for the celebration that followed. Olivia wore a dress Mrs. Calloway helped her sew, simple blue calico that made her eyes look impossibly bright. And Matthew wore his best shirt with his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Matthew kissed her so thoroughly that people in the back rows started whistling and cheering, and Olivia laughed against his mouth, dizzy with happiness. They spent their wedding night in the room off the Calloway's kitchen because they did not have a house of their own yet, but Olivia did not care. She had Matthew, and that was all that mattered. He was gentle with her, patient and tender, and when they came together for the first time as husband and wife, Olivia felt like she had finally come home after a long journey through dark places. The next morning, they rode out to the land Matthew had bought. It was beautiful in the autumn light, the grass golden and the creek running clear and cold. They walked the boundaries together, Matthew pointing out where he wanted to build the house and the barn, where the best grazing was, where they could plant a garden in the spring. "It is going to be hard work," he warned her. "We are going to be living in a tent until we get the house built, and money is going to be tight for a while. Are you sure you are ready for this?" Olivia looked around at the empty land, the endless sky, the future stretching out before them full of possibility and promise. She thought about the girl she had been back in St. Louis, so afraid of making the wrong choice that she had almost made no choice at all. She thought about the mine collapse, the darkness and fear, and Matthew digging until his hands bled to pull her out. She thought about Papa and the obsession that had consumed him, the cautionary tale of what happened when you let grief drive you instead of love. "I am sure," she said, taking Matthew's hand in hers. "Wherever you are, that is home for me now. We will build something beautiful here together." And they did. Over the following years, they built a life that was simple but rich in all the ways that mattered. Matthew worked from dawn until dusk, cutting timber in the mountains and hauling it back to their land, digging foundations and raising walls. Olivia worked beside him when she could, and when the house began to take shape, she turned her attention to making it a home. She sewed curtains from fabric she bought in town, planted flowers around the porch, filled the rooms with small touches that made the place feel lived in and loved. The cattle came next, a small herd Matthew bought with money he borrowed from Calloway. They were scrubby longhorns, tough and ornery, but they thrived on the good grass and reliable water. Matthew built corrals and hired a young man from town to help with the work, and slowly, carefully, the ranch began to turn a profit. In the spring of 1885, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Matthew one evening after supper, and he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, whooping with joy. They prepared for the baby together, building a cradle from smooth pine and filling it with soft blankets Olivia sewed during the long evenings. Mrs. Calloway came to stay when Olivia's time drew near, and on a clear December morning, their son was born. They named him Daniel, after Matthew's father, and from the moment Olivia held him in her arms, She understood a kind of love she had not known was possible. Daniel had Matthew's amber eyes and Olivia's dark hair, and he was strong and healthy, with a pair of lungs that could wake the whole ranch when he got hungry. Matthew was a devoted father, patient and playful in ways that surprised Olivia. He fashioned toys from scraps of wood, carved animals that Daniel clutched in his tiny fists. He sang to the baby in the evenings, old songs from his Texas childhood, and when Daniel cried in the night, Matthew was always the first one up, scooping the baby from his cradle and walking him around the house until he settled. "You are good at this," Olivia said one night, watching her husband sway back and forth with their son tucked against his chest. "I had good practice watching my younger cousins back home," Matthew said. "Besides, how could I not be good at it when I've got the most perfect baby in Nevada right here?" The years rolled on, full and busy. 2 years after Daniel's birth, Olivia had a daughter they named Clara, a tiny fierce thing who seemed determined to do everything her older brother could do, only faster and louder. And 3 years after that, another son, Samuel, who was quiet and thoughtful and happiest when he was following his father around the ranch, imitating everything Matthew did. The ranch prospered. They added more cattle, built a bigger barn, hired more hands to help with the work. Matthew's reputation as a fair boss and skilled rancher spread, and men came from all over looking for work. Olivia ran the household with quiet efficiency, cooking for the hands, managing the books, raising the children, and somehow making it all look easy even though it was the hardest work she had ever done. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the work was done, Matthew and Olivia would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the land they had built together. Sometimes they talked about the past, about the mine collapse and the day they met, about Papa and the tragedy that had somehow led to their happiness. "Do you ever regret it?" Matthew asked one evening when they had been married for 8 years. "Staying in Nevada, building this life with me instead of going back to St. Louis, where things would have been easier." Olivia looked at her husband, at the lines the sun and wind had carved into his face, at the strength in his hands and the love in his eyes. She thought about the life she might have had if she had never come west, if she had married Thomas Whitmore and settled into comfortable, respectable unhappiness. She thought about the moment in the darkness when Matthew's hand had closed around hers, when he had promised to pull her out, and how he had kept that promise every day since. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single second. You saved my life that day, Matthew. And then you gave me a reason to live it. Everything we have built here, everything we are, it is because you dug through that mountain to find me. How could I ever regret that?" Matthew pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I would do it again," he said quietly. "I would dig until my hands bled and my back broke. I would move the whole mountain if I had to. You are worth it, Olivia. You have always been worth it." They sat together in the gathering darkness, watching the stars come out over their land, over the house they had built and the family they had made. The past was behind them with all its pain and loss and near misses. The future stretched ahead, unknown but unafraid. And in that moment, with Matthew's arm around her shoulders and the sound of their children's breathing drifting through the open window, Olivia felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had been trapped in darkness once, buried beneath tons of rock with death pressing close on all sides. But Matthew had come for her. He had dug until his hands bled, had refused to give up, had pulled her into the light and then stayed by her side through everything that followed. He had given her not just her life, but a life worth living, full of love and purpose, and the kind of happiness she had once thought existed only in novels. The mine in paradise had taken her father, but it had also given her Matthew. That was not redemption exactly, because Papa's death could never be made right. But it was something. A thread of meaning woven through tragedy. A reminder that even in the darkest places, even when the mountain is falling down around you, there might be someone out there willing to dig through stone to bring you home. Years later, when Daniel was 18 and preparing to head east to study engineering, he asked his mother about the scar on her shin, the faint ridge of bone that had never quite set perfectly straight. "It is from the mine collapse," Olivia told him, sitting on the porch with Clara and Samuel gathered around to listen. "The one where I met your father." "Tell us the story," Clara demanded, even though she had heard it 100 times before. "Tell us how Papa saved you." So Olivia told them, painting the picture with words. The darkness, the fear, the sound of digging from above. Matthew's hand reaching through the gap, his voice promising that he had her, that he would not let her go. The way he had climbed down into the unstable shaft to free her leg, risking his own life without hesitation. The blood on his hands when they finally pulled her into the sunlight. "Your father is the bravest man I have ever known," Olivia said, looking over at Matthew, who was leaning against the porch rail with that familiar half-smile on his face. "He did not just save my life that day. He gave me everything I have, everything we have. This ranch, this family, every happy moment we have shared. It all started with him refusing to give up, refusing to leave me in the dark." Matthew came and sat beside her, taking her hand in his. His palms were still calloused from years of hard work, but the scars from that day had long since faded, replaced by new marks from new labors. "I could not leave you there," he said simply. "From the moment I heard your father screaming that someone was trapped, I knew I had to get you out. And then when I saw you, when I held your hand in the darkness, I knew I would spend the rest of my life making sure you never felt trapped or alone again." Clara made a sound that was half sigh, half theatrical groan. "You two are so romantic it is almost embarrassing," she declared, but she was smiling, her eyes bright with affection. "Romance is not embarrassing," Samuel said seriously. He was 14 now, thoughtful and earnest in a way that reminded Olivia of her father before grief had broken him. "Love like Mama and Papa have is rare. Most people never find it. We are lucky they did." "We are lucky you found each other," Daniel corrected, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for that, for finding each other, for building this place, for giving us this life. I know I am going away to school, but I want you to know that I will always come back here. This is home, and you two are the reason why." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind that came from overwhelming gratitude. She looked around at her family, at the ranch spreading out beyond the porch, at the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. It was not the life she had imagined for herself back in St. Louis, back when she had been a girl who did not know what she wanted, except that it was something more than she had been offered. But it was better than anything she could have imagined. It was real and hard-won and precious beyond measure. And it had all started with a mine collapse, with darkness and fear, and with a cowboy who had dug until his hands bled to pull her out alive, and then stayed by her side to help her build a life in the light. "I love you," she said to Matthew, not for the first time and certainly not for the last. "I love you so much." "I love you too," he said, kissing her softly, "forever and always, my hand in yours, pulling each other through whatever comes." And that, Olivia thought as she sat surrounded by her family on the porch of the house they had built together, was the truest definition of love she had ever known. Not some abstract romantic ideal, but the concrete reality of two people refusing to let go, no matter how dark it got. no matter how much it hurt, digging through mountains, bleeding and exhausted, but never giving up, never leaving each other behind. That was what Matthew had done for her on that terrible day in paradise, and it was what they had continued to do for each other every day since. Through loss and grief, through hard work and harder times, through births and deaths and all the million small moments that made up a life. They had held on to each other, and they had built something beautiful from the rubble of tragedy. The sun set over the Nevada rangeland, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Matthew Reeves sat with his wife and children, his ranch spreading out before him, and knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had dug through stone to find this life, had bled for it, and he would do it all again in a heartbeat, because she was worth it. Olivia was worth every drop of blood, every moment of fear and pain and desperate digging. She was worth the years of hard work that had built this ranch, worth the sacrifices and struggles and sleepless nights. She was worth everything, and he had known it from the first moment he held her hand in the darkness beneath Paradise, Nevada, and promised he would not let her go. He had kept that promise, and God willing, he would keep it for the rest of his life.